Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are diving into a couple of the absolute workhorses of any web page, HTML lists and tables. Seriously, these are the fundamental tools you're going to use all the time to organize information and just make things make sense.
So, let's start with a problem that every single person building for the web runs into. You've got all this great content, your ideas, your data, a bunch of text, but right now it's just a big jumble. How do you present it so people can actually understand it? Well, the answer is all about structure, and that's exactly what we're going to master today.
And here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll get a handle on lists. Then, we'll build a data table from the ground up. After that, we'll sprinkle on some style to make it look awesome. And finally, I'll share a few pro tips to really lock in your new skills.
All right, let's jump right in with our first topic, using lists to bring some order to your content. Now, this might sound super basic, but trust me, getting good at lists is one of the most powerful things you can do in HTML.
Okay, first up is the unordered list. You'll make this with a UL tag. This is your go-to, your bread and butter for any collection of items where the sequence just doesn't matter. Think about a shopping list or, a list of features for a product. The order isn't the point. And here is a perfect example of how that works. Now, don't get too bogged down by the code on the left. Just look at the pattern. You've got one UL tag to start the list, then each item inside gets its own LI tag. You wrap it all up with a closing UL tag, and boom, the browser automatically turns that into the nice, clean bulleted list you see on the right. Simple, right?
But what if the order is a big deal? Well, for that, we have the ordered list, or OL. This is for anything with a sequence. We're talking steps in a recipe, a top 5 countdown, or instructions on how to build something. This is where you absolutely need numbers, not just bullets.
And you can see right here how perfect this is for instructions. It's the same idea as before. We're still using li for each item, but this time we've wrapped them in an OL tag. And here's the best part. The browser does all the heavy lifting. It handles the numbering for you automatically, making sure everything shows up in the right order.
Now here's where it gets really fun. You are not stuck with boring black dots or plain old numbers. With just a little bit of CSS, you can take total control. You can change the bullet points to squares or circles, or even use a tiny custom image. You can switch your numbers to Roman numerals. The sky's the limit.
Okay, one last type of list to cover. This one's a bit of a special case, but it's incredibly useful. It's called a definition list. It's perfect for things like a glossary, where you have a term, the DT, and you follow it up with its description, the DD.
All right, we've got lists down. Now let's level up and talk about tables. If lists are for simple sequences, tables are your powerhouse for organizing more complex data into a nice, neat grid of rows and columns.
Before we touch any code, let's start with the end in mind. This is our target. This is what we want to build. A clean, professional table that organizes student data so you can easily see who's who.
So how do we actually build this thing? Well, it all comes down to 4 core tags that work together like building blocks. First, you have the main table tag that holds everything. Inside that, you build your table row by row with the TR tag. And then, inside each row, you put your cells. You'll use TH for the bold headers and TD for the regular data.
And here's what that looks like in the wild. See the pattern? At the top, we have one table row, one TR, that holds all our headers. Then, every student gets their very own TR with all their data inside TD tags. It's a really simple logical pattern. Row, cells, all the way down.
So, we've got the bones, the structure is there, but let's be honest, it looks a little plain. It's just text. So now that we have the skeleton, it's time to make it look brilliant with some CSS.
Just look at this transformation. On the left is our plain HTML. On the right, that's what happens after adding one single line of CSS to create a border. Instantly, it goes from a jumble of words to a proper organized table. This is the magic of CSS.
And the great news is, styling with CSS is basically a simple 3-step recipe. It's always the same. First, you select what you want to style. Second, you pick a property, which is how you want to style it. And third, you give it a value, which is how much. That's it. Select, property, value.
And these properties right here, these are going to be your best friends for styling tables. You can add borders, control the space between the cells, add padding inside the cells to give your text some breathing room, and of course, change up the background and text colors.
And when you start mixing and matching these properties, Look what happens. By adding some borders, a little padding, and a nice background color for the header, we've taken that basic HTML structure and turned it into something that looks clean, professional, and is actually easy to read.
Okay, to finish up, let's look at a couple of pro-level tricks for when your data gets a little messy. And then we'll do a quick summary of everything we've learned.
So what happens when your data isn't a perfect, neat little grid? You know, when one piece of information needs to cover more than one spot? Well, HTML has a solution for that: colspan and rowspan. Colspan lets a cell stretch horizontally across columns, and rowspan lets it stretch vertically across rows.
And here's a fantastic real-world example. Take a look at that sports cell on the left. See how it cleverly stretches down to cover 3 different rows? That's rowspan doing its thing. And up top, the name header spans 2 columns? Yep, you guessed it, that's colspan. These are super powerful for those tricky layouts. All right, so let's zoom out a bit. When it comes to lists, just remember that magic number, 3. We learned 3 fundamental types of lists: unordered, ordered, and definition lists.
And here is your core toolkit, all in one place. For lists, it's UL or OL to start and LI for every single item. For tables, it's that beautiful combination of table, TR for rows, and then TH or TD for your cells. That's really it. With just this handful of tags, you now have the power to structure almost any piece of content on the web. It is a total game changer.
So this is more than just code. It's the power to bring clarity and order to your ideas. You can now take a complete mess of information and transform it into something that's clean, professional, and easy for anyone to understand. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build first?